Hey now.
Hi.
And hello to you all. Welcome to Conversations with Keyshawn and Alexandra. We're two longtime friends with a tendency toward reflective, thought-provoking conversation. Sometimes our conversations are random. Other times, like now, we reflect based on themes in media. Today, we are talking about season 6, episode 3 of Queen Sugar. And just to let you all know, this is not a recap. We will not be discussing every scene. We won't necessarily be going in order. Also, we're assuming that you've watched the episode already. So if you do not want spoilers, come back. We'll still be here. All right. So this week, I think this lends some credence to the theory that we talked, or I guess the theories that you and I talked about with
hmm
the naming conventions, right? Because, so let's see, episode 1 was if you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, you would come back different. So that's what I'm saying. It sounds like it's telling a story. We just don't know
Right.
what the story is yet.
Now, when you watch it, because I watched, on demand
Mhm.
on my, from my cable provider, and I could see the names of the upcoming episodes, it just doesn't show me any information about it. Do you see that on your end as well?
I have the option to see it. I tried to avoid
I tried to not see it, but it was like as I was scrolling, I was like, oh, that's episode 4.
it.
Wait, shield my eyes. Right.
So yeah, that's I had noticed that I think last week when I was preparing,
Okay.
I was trying to have the name ready. And then I noticed that it had them listed. So I was like, oh wait, okay, note to self. So like
Right.
now I have the note to self to not watch the preview, and then also the note to self to not look at all the titles. So what I did this time is when I was watching the episode, at
Mhm.
one point I was like, oh, let me just pause it, and then like how it has the name on the screen. And so that's what
Okay.
I wrote. Also, I have to, so a correction and a concession. So the correction is that Vi's, the person that Vi has been helping is not Jimmy Dale's current wife. It is a different woman.
hmm
Um, and then even though, so I'm like,
Prosper is still alive.
I was like, okay,
It
so
is
someone
not a
was
dream.
slipping.
You
I'm like,
tried to
but someone was slipping because you
you tried to rain on my parade last week and make me mourn the man like he was dead and he is all the way alive.
but still, why was Ra in the hospital with no mask? Somebody did made a mistake because
I would say that was overzealous of them, maybe because he's already been vaccinated. They did just have a vaccination drive.
no, in a hospital they do not allow.
But in
Like
a hospital setting,
I
technically,
can't go
yeah.
to the dentist without a mask on. I can't go to any sort of clinic without a mask on. A full blown hospital, no.
But once you're in the dental chair, this is also a small town in Louisiana. This is not a major metropolitan city. This is not like Cedar Sinai in Los Angeles, big old hospital. This is St. Joe's, the hospital for the helpless, whatever. I don't know the name of it. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, it's not. They're like, oh, Ralph Angel, we delivered you as a baby. It's fine. And you got the vaccine and no one else is in the room. So, yes, but like you said, for a viewer like yourself who's aware of, COVID compliance procedures, it could lead someone to think it was a dream. I've had just in my soul was like, they're not going to kill this man. And if they do, they're not going to kill him till the very end,
Right.
like the very, very end. And because they needed a win. So
I wasn't necessarily thinking it meant that he was dead. I was just thinking that it was a happy dream for Ralph Angel that wasn't necessarily accurate.
but dreams never die, as it says in the opening sequence of this.
Right.
Dreams never die. There it is. He's still alive.
So, we start with him coming home. And so in that scene, everyone was masked but him, which like that to me makes a little more sense because, he's like his comfort is paramount, right? He's coming home from the hospital, but
Right.
everyone else was super on their P's and Q's. Everyone was masked, including Billy Badass, which, is her permanent name now. Uh, um,
Sorry, Billy.
and so it kind of tied into, well, I should say that the phrase that came to mind was our relationship versus your relationship, right? Because she's looking at like, okay, well, I know how he and I interact and I see how he interacts with you all. But that
Mm-hmm.
also reminded me of when we were talking about Nova, saying like, okay, well, you all see Calvin as like this police officer and all that, but his relationship with me has always been, XYZ.
Right.
But and then also like where loyalties lie, because clearly Prosper has embraced the Borderlones as his family.
Right.
And um we later get some more insight about some of the dynamic between Billy and Prosper.
Mm-hmm.
But even you could tell it's hard for her to see how close he is with them in contrast with their own dynamic.
It is. Well, and also, I mean, without jumping ahead in the episode, anytime you have like the prodigal daughter, prodigal son, someone who leaves home on purpose, without the intention of necessarily returning unless it's absolutely mandatory for them to do so, there's always something deeper there
Right.
where, like, I went through that. I left, not left, but I graduated from high school at 17, went across the country to go to college without the intention of ever returning to the small town where my parents lived
Right.
because of my upbringing, because of the experience I had. So I know that feeling of like, oh, you're the daughter that we never see. You're Keyshawn. Oh, we've heard about you, but we don't really know you. So I understand, Billy Badass's feeling, especially being the only child, coming home and saying, oh, okay, so you built a whole family
Right.
after I left. You acquired new daughters and a son, so to speak, and you have a deeper connection to these people than you do to me, your only child, and my children, and extended family from there. So I think that when she first came on the scene in the first episode, there was an opportunity for me to feel a bit of empathy for her. Like, this is your father. There's a reason why you left. In this episode, we find out why she actually left.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
The where like in contrast, my I grew up, born and raised by my mother,
Mm-hmm.
so she and I like that was my immediate family unit.
Right.
She is a daughter who made the choice to leave. And so even now I'm still continuing to build the relationship with, all of that family.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is, there's definitely something about, being surrounded by a family and feeling like love and loved, but also very much feeling like, okay, you all have a whole dynamic, and an array of shared memories that I'm not a part of. And
Right.
that can be very complex. Even when they post pictures that were taken at different pivotal times. And of course, I'm not in them.
Right.
And so, yes, that is very, yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and Billy was also softer, I would say, at this point, maybe because the panic of losing her father had obviously subsided because he's coming home and he's got to do a couple of weeks of physical therapy. So now it seems almost more appropriate
Mhm.
for those other conversations to happen while she's around, because she's not going to stay there. She clearly has children back in Chicago. She's not moving to St. Joe, but she's going to kind of stick around. And so I think that also is something that happens in families when, the prodigal son or daughter returns home because there's an emergency. Once the emergency has subsided, they sometimes exit immediately because they don't want to deal with the other reasons and the other dynamics and family drama, or they see this as an opportunity to say, wow, okay, while I'm here, let's go ahead and maybe talk about some stuff. And it seems like she's here for it, but she's not going to necessarily initiate it until later on in the episode. We see that she's like, okay, no, I'm here for this. So let's go ahead and let's unload some of this stuff while we have the time.
Right. And we also do get a glimpse into, more of what we saw foreshadowed last week in terms of her being similar to Charlie in terms of like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
a professional in this way, I'm comfortable speaking out in this way.
Right.
And so her legal acumen comes into play. Um, and she's been gone long enough where clearly she's not at all scared of white folks.
At all. Not even a little bit.
Which can come in handy, in these sorts of circumstances.
Absolutely. Well, and I think in addition to leaving a small town and going to a big city like Chicago, developing, like you said, a professional foundation for her to stand on, for her to step up and say, let me help these little small town actual farmers who have very limited scope of understanding of the legal system. All they know is I'm about to lose my farm if you don't give me this fucking check. That's all they know. That's it. They don't really care about the ins and outs of it. This episode was triggering in a sense for me just because, I mean, obviously these are stories, these are based on real experiences that people are having, but it's just like white folks just getting out of pocket just a little much, and I recognize that this show takes place in the South, and I recognize that these things are very real. It's also just okay, like enough already. That was my feeling when Charlie and Billy Badass and Nova and Ra are walking into the meeting and they see the sheriff there, the same sheriff that was, harassing them essentially at the vaccine drive is there. I was like, he's there because there's white folks in this meeting. And this is supposed to be a meeting on behalf of the Black Farmers Association. So it was just that it was triggering for me because it was that feeling of frustration toward like, y'all don't need your own association. You don't need it. Every other farmer who's not Black or in real life who's not Latinx in this country is white. So y'all don't need your own association. This is not a place for you. And it's that same feeling of the privilege of, white superiority that they believe exists that gives them right to be able to insert themselves in spaces that are literally designed for people who are not like them.
Right.
And the whole scene was kind of predictable to me as to how it was going to play out. They weren't going to hand out checks. They were going to try to delay the process. When the man spoke and said, the more complaints we have, the longer it can take, is really just, gaslighting them to say, like, stop filing complaints, stop complaining, and we'll give you all your checks. That whole scene, I was just like, my jaw was clenched and I was mad at the iPad the whole time I was watching.
Right. Yeah, girl. Yes. So, that was also a scene where Ralph Angel was highlighted. And the problem is, and has been, he's been trying to count his chickens before they hatch, or count his harvest before,
Count his canes. Right.
Right. And this episode, it was implied before, but this one, it's explicitly being put at the forefront that he does not want to ask for help.
No.
And even Darla is saying like, hey, babe.
Now might be a good time.
Right. But he's like, no, man, strong.
Man strong, need no help from woman, will figure out on my own. Right. Yeah. And the sad part about that is I understand, I have a brother. We talked about him before. I have a brother who's the baby of the family. And there's definitely been times in his early adulthood where he struggled. He slept on my couch. He slept on everybody's couch, all four of his sisters at one time in his early adulthood. And it was only as an alternative to sleeping in his car. And it was because he did not want to ask for help. He did not want anyone to think he couldn't figure it out. And now he's at a stage in his life where he's out in the world. He's working out of state. He was working out of the country before. So we're able to kind of sit back and say, okay, good. Yes, keep doing all of that. And we're still here to support you. We might not need to support you financially anymore, but we're still here to support you. We want to see you win. But should you fall, we're still going to be here to pick you back up. Ralph Angel seems like, maybe because he's the only male child of this family, that he has the obligation to carry not only Darla and his child and Blue, but also to carry the family. Whereas the sisters are like, we're good. We're trying to make sure you don't lose the land.
Right, right. And even flashing back on my own younger times,
Mm-hmm.
when I made the choice to relocate, it was specifically with the intention of not having the option of couch surfing with family. I could have moved to a city where I did have family, but
Right.
I very clearly remember thinking like, no, I don't want to do that because A, I want my privacy, and B,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it in the back of my head. Well, if push come to shove, I could always stay with so and so.
Right.
What I did not realize as I was choosing to relocate in 2008 is that the nation was about to enter a recession. So I did wind up having to couch surf, but I had to find those couches from scratch.
Okay.
And I did tell my mother what was going on, but most of the family I never made aware. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, pride is a hell of a drug. I will
Ma'am,
definitely say that.
very much so.
Um,
Very much so. Because
but
we paint it as like, we paint pride as a goal. Like, look at me, look at what I'm doing. I've accomplished this, I'm achieving that. But then when we peel back the layers, we're like, but you're really not though. And
it's
we
making
can
it
see
harder
that.
for yourself a lot
Yeah,
of the
you're making it harder for yourself, and you're not convincing us that you have it all figured out. And that's with Ralph Angel. It's like Charlie and Nova and Vi and Hollywood and everybody knows if you're pressed about getting this remedy check from the Black Farmers, from the FDA, if you're pressed about this money, that means you don't have it. And so that's where, later on in the episode, when we see the gathering at the real place, we see him bring in this friend from prison, which I thought was a cool interaction when Hollywood's like, oh, okay, noted. You know what I'm saying? Like, no judgment, but
right.
noted.
Yeah,
You are a prison friend. Okay.
right.
So his pause, because, sometimes with Black folks, it's just the pause, and we say a whole lot.
Just for a quick second.
Mental note. Gotta go ahead and put that right here so don't forget. We do that. And so the scene where Ralph Angel brings his boy to the real spot, then Hollywood's reaction to him told me, okay, you're connecting with your prison buddies, maybe because you're trying to create a safe space for healing for Black men. Good. And just a little bit concerned.
Right.
Just a little bit.
Right. Because, that really does tie into, something like I was about to dive into.
Okay.
Two things came to mind, right? So one was, as he is too stubborn to ask for help, at this point, we don't know what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, he also seems to be stubbornly sticking to his personal objective of staying on the straight and narrow path. He knows that all money ain't good money.
Correct.
He really is trying to be a changed man. So when the friend, was like, hey, bro, I got, it's low.
All you got to do is drive the truck.
But he was like, nah, man, I'm not about that anymore. So something else, though, it wasn't limited to that friend, but it just occurred to me in this room full of men, although it did seem that it was kind of like pre-screened. So that also occurred to me too, that if Dominic had come based on Nova's invitation, because you see, like, everyone seemed to have like been, what's it called, vouched for by somebody that
Correct.
Hollywood knew if
right
not get a direct invitation.
Right.
So when Hollywood started talking about this interaction with this little boy and he said his name, I was like, uh-oh, is the dad gonna be in the room?
Oh.
But no.
That would be good TV if he was in there.
Because we don't know if it's someone local or if it's someone from another town over.
It's a good observation, friend, because I didn't even, that gave me a little chill in the back of my neck.
Right,
like,
when he said his name and he said they were staying in a motel, I was like, why are you giving
so much information about these people that are supposed to be hiding, Hollywood?
Right.
Oh, okay. Ooh, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, I mean, so I guess then we can just go ahead and go on to Vi. So, like, well, and then also with Hollywood, just, again, what we talked about, like seeing your dreams come to fruition, right? He's been working toward this
Yeah.
for a while. And so you could tell like he was really happy that it was happening. And of course, it was a little slow start because, men folk, they not always trying to divulge a whole lot. Especially in mixed company, because
Mm-mm.
that's the whole thing. And you and I know that as people who create safe spaces, is that
Right.
even if everyone in the room knows me, if it's a space that I've created, if everyone knows
Hmm.
me, it's like, yes, I know and trust you, but I don't know all these other people. So,
Exactly.
and so you could tell that was it. And then you look, Micah's still trying to get him some liquor, boy.
Girl, I'm like, boy, if you don't relax, you can drink when you get back to the dorm. They're not giving you any alcohol. Stop it. Just let it go. Let it go. You don't need no liquor, clearly, because
Right.
we'll get to him later. But yeah,
Right.
no, this is just another episode where my affinity for Hollywood was affirmed
Yes.
yet again from his observation when they were at Vi's Pies and she's packing up the box to like, who's that for? And she's pressing him, oh, don't be nosy. And I'm like, he cares about you. He just wants to know, like, oh, wow, these are going to customers. That's fantastic. But then when he saw her pull that money out the cash register, it was like, again, Hollywood, mental note. We're going
Yeah.
to come back to this.
Because, and that's what's, how I relate to him, right? Because he's very much a person like, I'm not going to come out the bag off rip. Like, I'm just going to tuck stuff away.
Yes.
And then when it's pertinent, it's going to come up.
It's going to come up. And I'm going to do so with love, just like when he's like, I'm just going to wait outside and just, watch you go ahead and pack up the trunk. Then you just going to tell me what's going on. He doesn't come for her. I mean, not that he would need to be, but like based on what she's experienced, Vi is already very callous. She's very curt. That's just her way. And might be partially just because that's how she was brought up, and also partially because she survived, an abusive relationship and kind of just built up, a callousness about her. But Hollywood is always gentle and tender with her, even when he's like, bitch, you up to something, but I'm still going to be kind,
Right.
And then what does he do? He goes with her. And he also calls her out to say, like, FYI, I appreciate that you are this good Samaritan healer of the neighborhood type woman. However, you are also a woman. And if you did roll up and this woman's husband, who she's literally escaping from, happened to be there, I'm your husband. I want to protect you. So don't be sneaking around doing this shit. Like, don't do that. Like, and then not to correct her, but then she still comes back at him. And it's like, I mean, again, I'm like, Vi is not my least favorite character. I do not like her as a character, but I appreciate that Hollywood is gentle with her, because I think that him continuing to be like that, to say, yes, I'm going to talk about my mom stuff. I'm not going to talk about it with you. I'm going to talk about it with my boys because that's where I feel more comfortable. I'm going to take my time doing that. Let me go through my own process. And I will also let you be the person that you are. And I still feel a duty to protect you. So
Right.
let me do that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because yeah, definitely, my notes are like, Vi, why are you lying to your husband? And yeah, like he definitely peeped all that. And they did have that one tense moment where he was saying, like, okay, so you're putting other people ahead of yourself. And she's like, well, you're doing that too. And so it's like, when compliments are insults at the same time, because
Or
both,
backhanded
yes,
compliments, as we call them.
right, exactly. And I so many women in particular put other people's needs ahead of their own. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and sometimes it's like, well, you're supposed to do that when it's your kid, right? But a lot of us do that for our friends and our significant others, or even other family members, or just everybody, you know. And so yes, you do have to consider the fact that you're part of a union now, Vi. Like, you
Mm,
have married this man. Y'all aren't just a couple, like you are
right.
family. And not only is he your family, but you have an entire family that relies on you. And so you did put yourself in a situation that could potentially be dangerous. Um,
Yeah. And I'm
so
also figuring out, like, is she just part of a network for
maybe like the the
like a women's
whatever, the DV or
shelter or something.
whatever.
Yeah, I'm like, how did
I
she
don't
even
know.
find you? But
Right,
you know,
right. Um, but then we're also, and this is kind of related to something that we've talked about offline. Um, Never assume how much money women have, because remember, Vi is paying for that motel room. And so apparently Vi got a little more money than people might realize.
yeah, yeah.
He
And the
has
thing
enough
is
money to
too,
be paying for the room and giving her cash money and feeding her.
and also giving food away at the cafe that she owns and semi charging people, and she still has a home. And yeah, I mean, she could be sitting on gold bars for all we know. We just, she just got them tucked away under the bed or something like that. Yeah, no, I'm curious to know like where that storyline is going to play out, just because it does seem like they needed to give Vi another project to focus on, another person to focus on, because Charlie's like, I'm good. Mike is away at college. Nova's like, I'm cool. Like all the kids are kind of just like keeping her at an arm's length for their own reasons. And so it's like she needed somebody else to care for. So they gave her this battered woman, unfortunately, and her child. But it was interesting to see the interaction between Hollywood. Like you said, he mentioned this child and his interaction with him in the men's space. And then when we see them back at Vi's Pies, he's, helping him with the motorcycle, which of course I was like, a toothpick is a terrible idea. He could poke his eye out, but it was cool for the moment. But I see where you're going with that, Hollywood, but that seems kind of a dangerous solution to that wheel falling off. But observing Vi, seeing him with a young child, because we haven't really seen Hollywood with a kid since Blue left. That was the only like kid that we've really seen him be around, which kind of took me back to our conversation a couple weeks ago. We're talking about the dynamics of their May-December relationship, that he knew marrying her, he wasn't going to have any kids. That wasn't going to be part of their
And
deal.
mind you, at this point, again, it's all guesstimating, right? But my guesstimate is that like she's in her 60s, he's in his late 40s,
40s, maybe.
early 50s, maybe. So, but even if he is still in his 40s, I would definitely guess it's on the upper end at this point, because he feels older than Nova.
Yeah, he feels older than all of them. And I think he is, because when they did the family dinner, he's the one who led the prayer. And that's usually the oldest man at the table who would lead the prayer.
Well, right, because Davis would probably be neck and neck with Charlie,
About,
a year older,
right.
maybe two, but
Yeah.
not significantly older. And just even so with that said, of course, we know men's childbearing years are pretty much all of their years.
Endless.
But for the most part,
child producing, because they don't bear the children, but they produce them. Yes.
Super valid. But so if he's between 48 and 54, in theory, he wouldn't necessarily still be longing to create a baby,
have more children, right?
But he clearly enjoyed the interaction.
Right.
I was processing, not just watching him, but also again processing her own feelings about never having
children of her own. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
So, well, yeah, I'll circle back to that towards the end. Let's talk about, to keep it kind of like with the ones that have less, I think I want to do Darla, Micah, Charlie, then Nova, and then that kind of dives into like the master themes, the overall.
Yeah, thinking of age, I made Charlie the same age as me because our sons are the same age. So I made her like mid 40s. So mid 40s would be Charlie, almost 40s would be Nova. I say like she's around
older. Isn't
she's
Nova
over 40?
I thought it was Nova, Charlie, Ralph Angel.
Is that right? We did talk about that in the first episode.
she's, I hate to say this, no disrespect, Charlie, but she's a break baby.
She's a break baby. Yeah. I thought she was, no, you're right. You're right. She is the oldest. Nova's the oldest. That's right. So then maybe, but then again, Nova and Charlie are not that different in age. So she
Maybe
could have
like
been a break baby who's like 18 months apart
right.
from
So
Nova.
yeah, I'm so with that, okay. So then Nova 46, Charlie 44, Ralph Angel,
Maybe 30,
yeah.
if that.
Yeah, he's like way younger. Yeah, like he could be their kid.
Correct. Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
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 Because really he feels 20 something, but
Yeah. He feels like my brother's age, like 29, 30 years
Mhm.
old.
Okay,
You
okay.
know? Yeah.
And that's the whole thing we have to remember, right? Time always passes because
Yeah.
like of course I'm very aware that Seth is no longer 3, right?
Exactly.
But because I have less of a connection with your siblings,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yes, your brother would now be 30-ish. He's not 22 anymore.
No,
Yeah.
he's not. No, he's not. And he has 2 children now. So yeah. Yeah.
So bananas.
It's
All
a
right.
trip. I know.
So okay, Darla, she spoke a little more this episode.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as the men were having the grand opening, the women were
They were
having
having it.
night.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Ava did not intentionally do this, right? I forget the name of that like media test where you count how many scenes women are having conversations that aren't about relationships.
Mm,
And it'll,
it'll
we'll
come.
highlight it next time. But so unfortunately the bulk of their conversation was about the reconciliation, which we'll get to in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But something that Darla said that stood out to me is that she's been experiencing a sense of like foreboding. She's getting further along in her pregnancy. Things are good in her relationship. Of course, they're worried about money, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of characterized their lives. So
Right.
so that's not like a big deal per
It's
se.
not like a new thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But so she's, even as all of this wonderfulness, girl, grammar, child. Anyway, but even as all of these good things are going,
That's something Darla would say. Wonderfulness.
thank you. I was channeling my inner Darla. But she's also experiencing like this sense that something is going to happen. And Vi says, that's exactly how they want us to feel. They never want us to just be present in our joy. And that, I appreciated that, because of course that's an observation that you and I have made in various instances.
Yeah, that line, I almost wrote that down when she said they want to make us so that we don't even trust joy.
Right.
And I was like, ooh, that's deep. And by us, we're talking about Black people, just so you know, that and they were talking about white folks, not all y'all, but you know who you are, that they don't even want us to trust joy, because so much in our family history and our culture and our ancestral history generationally, that anytime that we had any sense of like jubilance or joy, it was always paired with something tragic and chaotic. Like when I was in New Orleans earlier in the spring, we went to Congo Square, which I go every single time just because it's such a powerful like space to be in. And Congo Square in New Orleans, it's now inside of Louis Armstrong Park. But at the time when it was established, it was the only place in the city of New Orleans where enslaved people could gather once a week to be able to have drum circles and dance circles and, practice the traditional spiritual events and practices and ceremonies that they had brought over from the continent. And so going there now, it's like there's, statues and images of, Black folks dancing and smiles on their faces, but knowing that by the time the sun went down, they had to go back to the plantation. So it was like this moment, these couple of hours a week and that was just for people who were in New Orleans. If you were outside of New Orleans, you weren't going to Congo Square. You couldn't go that far. They weren't going to trust you to go that far. So it was a moment of when she said that, it was like, yes, that's exactly, even now, with what's going on right now, it's having moments of joy met with, okay, wait, what's happening with Haitian refugees right now in Texas? Is that really going on? So that reminder, because Aunt Vi, she be coming with the wisdom. I don't have to like her to respect her. Okay, y'all, just so you know. I don't have to like Aunt Vi to respect her elder wisdom. So when she said, trust joy, that really resonated with me because, yes, in real life, there's moments when we're like, oh my God, there's so much going on in this world, but we have those wins and we get to celebrate those wins even amidst everything else that's happening. That's a reminder to trust joy. So yeah, that stuck out for me. I would say that was like her best line in the entire episode.
And
So
also, I might even tack on to that to make sure that when you hear an inner voice, like, is it your inner voice or is it the voice of white supremacy that you've internalized? Right. So just, oof, yes. Okay. So another kind of quick, visit before we get into a couple more of the deeper storylines.
mm-hmm.
Micah experienced baby's first panic attack, y'all.
He did. He did.
I was in my 20s before, when I had mine. So I don't know. Technically he might be 20.
He might be 20 this year.
But I was like mid 20s and I was alone. He was not. He was with that same friend.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Professor's still not in.
We haven't seen her again.
Did they just, is she going to come back or was it just
I don't know, maybe it was just the thing, maybe that was just
to let us know, like, hey y'all, in case you forgot, he's an adult and he's having sex.
There you go. Ding ding ding, he ain't a baby no more. Yeah, I think maybe that's all that was.
So
but you were saying he wasn't alone. I think that might be a frat brother, yes. Possibly.
And so last week you were saying that part of the reason you thought that you might be thinking that he's queer is because we know that in real life he's queer.
The actor is. Right.
I think a part of me was cognizant of that because I think it like popped up on, like my YouTube something. But no, for me, it's just a vibe that I've always had. And so like this friend, I don't know.
I mean, I would not be mad, Ava DuVernay, if you wanted to give us a little bit of queerness in Micah before this series is over. I would not be mad at that, especially because that would definitely be something that's pushing the envelope in not only Black culture, but small town Black culture, blackity Black family. It's not like this eccentric, forward thinking, modern type family. They're very old school in a sense. So I think that would be cool. And if we kind of left that on like a question mark note at the end would be okay. I was, when I saw it happen again, see, this is what happens for me. And this is why this is such a good show. Because any show that I can literally insert myself into the show and feel like I could live here. This could be me. This could be my life. Is anytime that I see, these characters going through something that I feel like I can relate to. Like I have a son who'll be 20 years old in less than 2 weeks. Well, about 2 weeks from now, he's out in the world. He got a car in May, so he's driving. He lives in Louisiana. He lives in New Orleans. Right now, he goes back and forth from New Orleans to Texas often and takes trips. And he's out being a Black man who's 6'4", who has the sweetest, most tender demeanor, super eccentric, very creative. However, they don't see all that. And to my knowledge, so far, ancestors guarding and Creek Don't Rise, he has not had a negative interaction with the police. However, that is a reality, unfortunately, that he may have to face because my brother, my father, uncles, ex-husbands, everybody else I know of a certain age has, and it's a traumatic experience. So I appreciate the way that the show is depicting Micah's experience as not only a Black man, but a young Black man, a boy at the time when he was first pulled over at 16 years old, to show the reverb of what that PTSD actually looks like. And super grateful that when Micah had his panic attack, he was out in the open. So the friend who was consoling him was doing so in front of everybody else to say like, this is okay for us to do this for each other. And this is also very normal for us to have these experiences.
Absolutely. Because of course, and they didn't zoom in on the people in the background, but you already know, like,
They weren't laughing. They were
well,
just,
but also they were like, A, what are we supposed to do? B, feelings are on display. What are we supposed to
what are
do?
we supposed to do? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we do with these feelings?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, another well done scene. I would love to hear men talk about that scene. I'm trying to think. I know like a there's a heterosexual couple that reviews the show.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to think if I haven't seen any men who review this show, but I don't know. I might just have to look. The one man I know who watches the show, I don't want to call him. So yeah. Anyway,
You're like any other men who watch the show. If you'd like to share with us your ideas, you know how to find us.
yes.
I I would hope. I mean, my father's almost 64 years old. Like I say, he's an old school black man. He's progressive to an extent because he has 4 daughters and he had no choice but to be progressive as it relates to his views about women in particular. I would say that overall, he's a pretty emotionally vulnerable guy. You know, we do a YouTube show on Saturday mornings. There's been several times when he's had to, as he said, his eyes begin to sweat, in certain situations. And so I've always known him to be like that. My uncle, his brother, the same way, my grandfather also. And these are black men. These are like by no means effeminate, not that you have to be, but these are very much men who expressing emotion or any type of vulnerable emotional experience is something that they were definitely discouraged from doing, not only by example, but also by direction. And so I think that I would hope that black men who are watching the show, maybe with their significant others or by themselves, because it's like a 50-50 cast, men and women.
Right.
And I think that the show's done a pretty good idea of keeping the storylines very balanced. It's not just women focused, it's not just men focused. It seems like this season we're seeing a little more attention on the mental health of the men that are on the show, especially with Hollywood opening the Real Spot for them to have a physical space to be able to collect and gather. I also liked in the scene where he's like, you ain't gonna get no yak if you don't start yakking. Like, I thought that was really clever. Like,
Yes. Yes.
open up, damn it.
Right.
Tell your stories.
This is not just a bar, bro. Like,
Yeah, this is not just a bar.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's take it up to Micah's mom, Charlie.
Okay.
So apparently, so I don't know if there was a big announcement that we weren't shown, or if this was the big unveiling, but there were clearly, like, it wasn't announced at this dinner, right? Everyone knew why this dinner was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knew what the deal was.
Right.
Micah knew what the deal was, because remember, that was one of our things off rip, is like, please do not tell the whole family without telling
Before you
them.
tell him.
Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't see exactly how the rollout happened, but everyone had opportunity to do their own internal processing, so it wasn't gonna, which was smart, because listen, the borderlines don't always know how to act if you just spring something on them.
Yes, so no, they don't act. They just react. Right. They just
so give them time to have their little snarky comments off to them between themselves.
Right. Right.
They will come to this dinner and act right. But it is, for the most part, it looked like everyone was welcoming Davis back into the fold with open arms.
Yeah.
And because he's their family too. They had been together for a very long time, and as he even mentioned, we don't know his own family dynamics, but he embraced them as a family. And
right.
because they were so young when they had Micah, he was still growing up, and so you could tell he was happy not only to be reunited with Charlie, but also to
Mhm.
be reunited with the Borderlones as a whole.
Yep.
And Micah is, very much being the good son, like, this is not necessarily about my feelings. My mom is happy. Let's focus on that.
Right. Right. Which is why even when they had, the call, with him over the phone and she's just asking him about how he feels about it, it's like, if you're happy, I'm happy, which I can relate to. I'm in a relationship now. My son is almost 20 years old, and I got into this relationship when he was almost 17, about to graduate from high school. And I was across the country and we were in different states at the time. But at that time, even then, when I introduced him to my partner, he's kind of like, it's whatever, she's not going to raise me. I'm already raised, I'm entering adulthood. I'm about to leave home myself. So for Micah, and this is also his father. This isn't like a new man that he's being introduced to, a new person he has to get to know. It's really like, just there's already a seat at the table for him.
Right.
He's just kind of re-entering a place that was already carved out for him before, but re-entering it with new expectations and hopefully new experiences. And so I think that that's also very true to life. It's one thing this show does really well is that, with the exception of Ralph Angel being in the hospital without a mask on, for the most part, the shit is pretty realistic. Like, most of the things that they've shown us are things that I could very much see happening in real life, where some other TV shows, it's kind of like, that was a bit of a stretch, So, yeah.
Right. And then something, going back to the ladies' night scene, Bai pointed out, if, as you all are now looking at going public in your relationship, you're both public figures. So it's not just about you and your, political aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
He is in the spotlight as well. And so both of you are going to be subject to, the effects, the impacts of both of your careers on each other, y'all's history,
Right.
on your future endeavors. And, Charlie even says to Davis, like, I don't want to have to choose between, this or that. I want it all, right?
Right.
And that's something that so many women say, but in real life, you can't necessarily have it all. And she seems to have that realization in the end, like, oh, wait, yes, he is accepting a job in Los Angeles, and I am looking at a career path that will keep me in Louisiana. And it's like, did she not think about that? Like,
I feel like there's a part of her that maybe in their, like she said, in their last little exchange, we separated, found ourselves separately, and have chosen to reunite. And so what that reunited relationship looks like may look very different in a lot of ways than the relationship before. Because when Davis asked her, do you think you'll ever consider moving back? He, again, is still in that place of humility, like, would you come back? As opposed to, when are you coming back?
he does still think of that home as their home, though.
He does. He does.
Which, honestly, if I were in her position, well, we've talked offline about the fact that I think, like, not living with your partner is actually
is completely acceptable.
But
and maybe they're working that in. I don't know.
But also, even in the context of their relationship,
mm-hmm.
even if they do want to have, like, the Louisiana home, the California home, I don't think it should be their old home. They need it.
I thought about that when he said, like, I want to fix the house up, and do you think you'd ever come back to LA? A part of me was like, didn't y'all liquidate the house when you got divorced? That's me. But I'm like, apparently not. Apparently the house that Micah grew up in, as far as we would know, is still there. I agree. I feel like fresh start across the board would probably be the best. I also do think it's a curious storyline if they do allow them to continue to live apart, because again, this couple met in college, had a baby young, got married young, were married through the majority of their 20s, probably into their 30s, had a very tumultuous divorce, a very public end to their relationship. Now, if they choose to reunite, the expectation isn't going to be for her to just move back into their house and go back to being his publicist. You
Right.
know what I mean? She's now her own person. And so I think that it'd be cool if we do challenge that narrative that says, well, couples are supposed to fill in the blank, live together, do this, do that, as opposed to saying, well, no, this couple, they already know no one's cheating. This is what we're doing. We're also maybe taking it slow
Yes.
and saying, yes, I'll come be with you in LA for long weekends. And sometimes you can come here, but I'm not uprooting my entire life to go back to where we were. Cause this isn't about returning. It's reconciliation, but reconciliation doesn't mean going backwards. It means repairing something and going forward. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So that leaves us to Miss Nova and then, kind of the themes. So, uh, I have a sense of humor. So my first note is what's beef?
What's beef? Beef is when you, yeah.
Right. Because clearly she is not feeling Billy, and we don't know why, right? We know that she perceives that Billy owes her something. Um, but then she's talking about, like, listen, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them and all that, right? She's like real rah, 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 like, man.
Right, like on site, Billy.
Right.
I'm just waiting to take my mask off. Don't catch me in the alley, girl. I'm like, dang, what
Right.
did she do? But
And
what did we talk about last week? Where we kind of like hinted at the fact that there was some type of lovers' quarrel, in a sense, that happened between them. And then we find out this week that there was a couple of reasons why
right,
there was beef
right.
between Billy and Nova.
And so, spoiler, they were not lovers.
As
They
far as
were
we
just
as far as we know, because how does she know that she liked girls unless she liked her?
very valid, very valid. You're right. You're right. Yes. Okay. Let me bring that back. You're right. And also, if they were best friends from like baby
Right.
18, ain't no telling what happened between 6 and 12, child, because
Girl. Them sleepovers in the country, this is a different kind of sleepover. You know what I mean? You can sleep out in the tent, on the land, and do all kind of things
right, right.
with your best friend.
Because too, like, for most, and I don't think straight people would admit this, I'm pretty sure they did it too, but like most of us learned about our bodies and sexual sensations with our like same-sex friends,
Yes.
and some of us chose to keep on rocking.
Like, well, this is great. Why does this have to just be practice? Yeah.
But so during the ladies' night,
Mm-hmm.
it was foreshadowed that once upon a time there was a rumor going around town that Jimmy Dale had an affair with Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when that was broached, I'm like, okay, wait, how can that be right if she's Nova's age? Put a pin in it, right?
Yeah.
So then we get to the end, and I will be honest, friend, when I was watching this part, I started to text you like, okay, there's going to be some triggers at the end. But then I was like, well, no, don't just, she knows what kind of show this is.
Mm-hmm.
But, just my, I love you, friend. And
I love you, friend. Yes.
But so, um, the, I kind of, this ties into the Nova story, but it also
Mm-hmm.
kind of ties into a theme, which is the adultification of Black girls, right?
Yes.
Um, I don't know if any other ethnic or racial group uses the term fast to refer to girls.
I don't think so.
But that is something that I remember hearing as like a descriptor of girls for pretty much as long as I can remember. I was going to the Boys and Girls Club and people talk about girls being fast. And the thing is, first of all, unless the girls are playing with each other, they're not alone in whatever interactions are vastness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But also, you and I know 18 might be old enough to vote, but it's not an adult.
Absolutely not.
21 is old enough to drink, but yeah, I wouldn't say grown, maybe
Right.
adult, but not grown,
Not
right?
grown. Right.
And so if there is any sort of circumstance
Mm-hmm.
in which Vi's husband is having a sexual encounter with Nova's peer,
Right.
the fact that the girl, the child in the interaction, is thought to be consenting to it,
Mm-hmm.
is thought to be I mean, really consenting kind of describes all of the phrase I want to use, like a willing
Mm-hmm.
participant, let alone have any sort of like authority in it,
Right.
right?
Right.
You can't, a child can't have an affair, first of all.
No. Period. Full stop. A
Right.
child cannot have an affair.
And so the fact that anyone would look at, so okay, the way that they unroll it is that Jimmy Dale had declared that Billy was good in bed. So
Mm-hmm.
first of all, why are you, grown man, bragging about having had a sexual encounter with a girl while you're married?
Right.
So there's like multiple things wrong with this.
Right.
But then the town folk, including her father and possibly Vi, we're not clear on
Well,
that.
Vi, based on what she said when they were having the ladies talk and Vi was on the sofa, she said, I was really that really bothered me because Billy is like family. Again, villainizing Billy, the child who was involved in this affair. So that was another, again, like, okay, but that was another indicator for me, like, dang, Vi, like you really, because again, first it was you and Nova were, you and Billy were thick as thieves. And I'm like, well, thick as thieves, joined at the hip, that implies you're probably the same age.
Right.
So for Vi, again, speaking obviously in past because she was caught up in a toxic relationship and whatever, wouldn't see the man as being at fault, but would villainize the girl for being at fault. And then, but yeah, continue.
Right. Because like a girl can't be the other woman.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
And so what we learn in this episode is that the only person in this town who recognized and understood that Billy was a girl who had been violated by this adult man who just happened to be married to Ernest's sister.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that set aside, an adult man violated this girl,
Mm-hmm.
and only one person in town believed her.
Right.
And she felt so validated in that moment and just had this moment of like, wow, this is what it is like to have a father who loves and believes you when you tell him the truth. So
Right.
that also gives us clarity on that. We don't know if that's the thing.
Yeah.
Probably is, though.
Right.
That is really the issue with her and Prosper. But
Right.
it also made her, out of her hurt, out of her pain, she then said or chose to, I guess because she wasn't experiencing that sort of acceptance at home, She
Mm-hmm.
wanted to rob the person closest to her of it.
Yeah.
It's not a logic I can understand, but hurt people hurt people.
Right.
And so then she chose to out Nova to Ernest, and that as Nova sees it, damaged her relationship with Ernest until, the end.
Right.
Of
Right.
course, the whole thing about all of the storylines around Ernest is that we're only
Mm-hmm.
hearing about them in hindsight. We didn't get to see them.
Right.
But the way that Ernest is painted by everybody, is he likely to have been homophobic? Yes.
Right.
A 60 something in,
Small town, Louisiana. Yeah.
but his daughter, I don't know. But
Yeah.
we also know, you
Mm-hmm.
and I in particular know that it can absolutely take your family a long time to come around.
Definitely.
And that coming
Definitely.
around can look different in
Right.
different circumstances. And um yeah, it can look different.
It can look
So
different. Yeah.
both, Billy and Nova hurt each other. They were hurt. They
Mm-hmm.
never talked about any of this until now, which is
Mm-hmm.
easily 25 or more years later,
Years
maybe
later.
30
Right.
years later, based on kind of the guesstimating we were doing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So are they gonna rebuild their friendship? Is there even a point? Like,
I feel like there is. I mean, I think it's interesting because you have Billy telling us her story and the reason why she left St. Joe. Nova potentially hearing this truth for the first time because she had heard the rumor, of course, and she had heard the way that people in the town were spreading the rumor, but she had never heard this truth before. And then there's now Vi, who will most likely hear this truth, Prosper, who will hear this truth. Everybody's going to have to relive that experience who was around at the time. So I think there is going to be an opportunity for the reconciliation of a relationship between Vi and Billy, Prosper and Billy, because I can say as a daughter of a father who turned the other way when I experienced sexual assault as a girl, it takes a lot of work to be able to build trust and feel like that person is actually going to protect you ever again. Even as a 40-something-year-old woman, they're still like, but you didn't protect me. So I love you, but you didn't protect me. So I'm going to build and I'm going to reconcile. I'm going to build a new relationship with you, but just know that you didn't show up in the way that I needed you at that time. So I feel like for Billy, I think she loves her dad. She wants them to have a great relationship. She wants to be able to find a place for her in this Prosper Bordelon tribe, that they've built. But in order for her to do that, this truth has to be revealed to everybody so that they can all stop looking at her like a villain when in reality that's not who she is. So I hope that the conversation that happened between her and Nova can't keep her mouth shut anyway. She gonna tell everybody what happened anyway. So I feel like it's gonna come out. I feel like that was the theme of this episode, was reconciliation,
right,
because the relationship between Nova and Billy reconciled, the relationship between Davis and Charlie out in the open reconciled, even reconciliation between Vi and Hollywood because the secret is out. So that's also another piece of it. Secrets are coming out.
right.
We're not hiding shit anymore. So I hope so, because of course Billy has family in Chicago. She got her kid. She's not going to just stay in, Louisiana forever. But it would be nice if when we tie up this series with a bow, that there's reconciliation between, the families all together.
Right, right. And the other, like, as far as reconciliation goes,
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of one of the other themes I wanted to kind of talk about, was like the shared family meal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that, I think, is probably one of the biggest things that we as Black folks miss in the context of the pandemic,
Yeah.
because that has been even when we talk about how soul food is like revolves around how we were relegated to the leftovers and
Right.
all that, but it was a time that we carved out, kind of like what you talked about with those couple of hours to go into town
Mm-hmm.
and be in community. um it is a time, even if you think about the movie Soul Food, where once a week, because at this point everyone's grown and they have their separate lives, but this time that this family makes to come together and share time, share space, share love, share food.
Mm-hmm.
um and even, yes, they were welcoming Davis back into the fold, and the shared prayer, because in this context all of the family is the same faith,
Right.
and all of that. But
Right.
it just, it even made me think about like my family, like, man, yeah, it has been a minute since,
Mm-hmm.
like, I made a trip and like it was everybody, because life really does happen, right? Like,
Right.
even if now we were to all gather, now we have, someone who's incarcerated and things like that, so it won't be the same. And so it really is, um I'm guessing, especially if there is that reconciliation with Billy, Prosper, and of course they're an extension of the Bordelons,
Mm-hmm.
we may see, another shared family meal that will include them as well, right?
Right. That would be cool. Yeah, that would be cool. That's definitely something that I grew up with was family meals outside of, holiday gatherings, but family meals. And even if it wasn't always once a week, it was at least twice a month because we, lived like 100 miles away from my grandparents at some point, but it was definitely part of the norm. And then now, even during, I would say, the height pre-vaccine, I would say, because we're still in the pandemic, but pre-vaccine, we were just doing those things virtually. We'd have the Zooms on and we're all kind of breaking bread together and trying to, still maintain that tradition. But yeah, there's definitely value in that. And I mean, no matter what size your family is, if it's a family of 2 or 5 or 14, like mine has expanded to, it's nice to be able to have that time. And it's also a time when we do our best to at least get through the meal without anybody's issues. So food doesn't get thrown, but
Don't waste good food now, listen.
don't be wasting food. You serve your issues till the food gets cleared, then we can yell at each other. But yeah.
All right. Well, I am very much looking forward to what's next. Like I said, I know I I had stepped away from the screen and the preview started to come on, and I was like, no, and I ran over and I hit the stop.
I literally, as soon as the first credit come up, I just stop watching it because I'm like, I don't want it to sneak up on me or something like that. And this is actually cool because I haven't really watched it in this way before, so there's a lot of intention I mean, I've always enjoyed the show, but watching it now, there's a different intention. Like I'm not on my phone, I'm not doing anything else, I'm not washing dishes, I'm just sitting and watching it, which is actually kind of cool because I'm absorbing it in a different way.
Especially when you think just in the context of how we live now, how often do we get to do just a single, like, monotasking?
One task.
Everyone wants to multitask. No, monotasking is what.
Monotask. It's so much better. It's so much better for like your mental health also to just monotask. Yeah. We're not robots.
Right.
We're not supposed to
So
multitask.
yes, yay. Thank you,
Yay.
Sean. Thank you, dear viewer, for joining us once again. We will be here next week. We are on a little earlier than usual. As much as I would love to say, like, yes, look forward to this, it's not a guarantee. But yes, every Wednesday we will be here, and maybe a little extra. We will see what that looks like.
Right.
So yes, look down in the box below. You can see links to each of us so you can know a little more about what we each do individually. And yes, if you like our vibe, like the video, share with your people, subscribe to the channel, then tap the little bell so that it lets you know when we release new things. Yes,
Yay.
thank you.
Awesome. This was
Toodaloo.
great. Peace, y'all.